right, Goody, what's all this? Another promising contender for the regional heats of Young Delinquent of the Year?
Report involving the federal probe of Congressman Matt Gaetz. The New York Times has a new report on Gaetz's efforts to head off that investigation in the final days of the previous administration. The Times' Maggie Haberman shares a byline in the story, joins us now by phone.
So what have you learned about the attempt to get a pardon?
So I understand the way it's been described to us by multiple people who are familiar with what took place is that Gaetz did two things. Publicly on Fox News, and I think he tweeted it, he said that the former president should pardon literally everybody. I think he mentioned the Thanksgiving turkey. He talked about Joe Exotic, that because in his words, the quote-unquote liberal crowd was going to come after allies of the president. There was also
I've got a very, very bad feeling in my stomach about this.
So a private conversation that he had with White House officials about a blanket pardon. He wanted one for himself. He was suggesting one for allies of his in Congress. We're not sure specifically who. White House officials thought it was bizarre and knocked it down pretty quickly. Now, remember, this was not what we're told is that White House officials did not know specifics about what Gaetz was under investigation for at that point. We don't know how much Gaetz knew, but we do know that at that point it was clear that his friend, this tax collector in Florida, himself was under investigation related to issues regarding young girls or young women. So all of this paints this picture of somebody who sought a blanket pardon, ostensibly because he thought he'd be targeted because of the former president. But now allies of the former president are looking back on it and questioning whether this was an effort to protect himself because he knew what was going on. So he has, I should just note, denied wrongdoing.
So you don't know if he for sure knew that there was this investigation, but he was aware, according to your reporting, that this person he was linked to, the tax collector, was under some form of investigation.
Correct.
And so the White House, they didn't take this seriously at the time?
The officials in the White House who learned of it thought it was very strange. They were perplexed by it. They didn't want to go ahead with it. They thought, among other things, it would set a bad precedent, and it died fairly quickly. Now, President Trump was aware of this request. It's not clear whether he had a specific conversation with Gaetz directly, but it was not something that the former president pushed for Gaetz either, as far as we know.
And what does Gaetz's office say to all this?
Gaetz's office has acknowledged that he talked publicly about receiving a pardon. They have maintained that, he was not doing so because he was under investigation for this latest issue. And we will learn more as we go. But at minimum, it is of note that he was seeking this blanket pardon at a time when an associate of his was in legal trouble.
Maggie Haberman, it's fascinating reporting. Thank you.
Once in a while, I'd like to nick someone whose balls had dropped.
Off the possible federal charges, right?
That's right, Anderson. In an email today, he accuses the media of publishing lies and dragging his dating life into their political attacks. He then asks for money to help him fight back. And despite the federal sex crimes investigation and the separate allegations, he shared pictures of nude women with other lawmakers while on the floor of the House. We're also learning that Gaetz is scheduled to speak at an event put on by Women for America First at a Trump resort in Florida on Friday.
Like the doo-doo.
Especially this notion that while Matt Gaetz and Donald Trump were, of course, sending Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump was anyway, to every courthouse they could find in America, falling on his face with fake election law claims, there's Matt Gaetz preparing for the end of the Trump presidency by begging for a pardon for himself.
And let's start with the obvious observation, Lawrence. You don't ask for a presidential pardon unless you've committed crimes, unless you need a presidential pardon. But it's nice to actually have some Supreme Court precedent to look to put this in context. So more than 100 years ago, 1915, there was a case called United States versus George Burdick. George Burdick was a New York newspaper editor for the New York Tribune, and President Woodrow Wilson issued George Burdick a pardon. George Burdick said, "I don't want one because I don't believe I've committed a crime." And here's what the Supreme Court said. They said, A pardon carries with it an imputation of guilt, and if you accept a pardon, that is virtually a confession of guilt. So if we extend the Supreme Court rationale to Matt Gaetz, what does it mean when you request a pardon, when you seek out a pardon? It obviously, if you apply the same rationale, has an imputation of guilt and could be viewed as a confession of guilt.
Hi, everyone. This is Congressman Matt Gaetz. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank the great people of Northwest Florida for this overwhelming election win tonight. You know, it's always special to win an election and receive a positive performance review from my bosses, the voters of this great district. And to win it by such an overwhelming margin when...
Major local villain for months, but he's slippery, like an owl.
Senior legal analyst Preet Bharara. So, Preet, I want to get your reaction to what we learned from Maggie Haberman. First of all, does it change anything for you, the idea of him seeking blanket pardon?
Well, it's another crazy story. I mean, we were up late on the last day of Trump's presidency trying to see who he might pardon, and we were thinking about people that he might preemptively pardon, including his family members and including himself, and didn't know that this was something that was maybe on the table. But what I think is really a dangerous sign for Matt Gaetz, a couple of things. One is, as the reporting just suggested, you have this individual, Mr. Greenberg in Florida, who, as the charges keep mounting against him, and he's facing more and more jail time as additional counts are brought to bear against him, the easiest way for him to avoid jail time, as we've seen in other cases as well, is for him to flip. And who to flip on? Who better to flip on with federal prosecutors than a sitting member of Congress? So that's bad, because all the incentives are in favor of him cooperating. There's perhaps audio recordings. We know that there's surveillance footage. He can fill in the gaps and connect the dots with respect to bad behavior on the part of Matt Gaetz that has been reported but not yet proven. And the second thing I would say is a lot of this reporting suggests that to the extent there was some interest on the part of people who knew Matt Gaetz and his bad conduct, alleged bad conduct, were in a position to remain silent. They're no longer remaining silent. Like it's not a coincidence that all these stories are leaking out about Matt Gaetz showing pictures of nude women and videos of nude women on the floor of the House, and that he might have sought this pardon. It seems like the floodgates have opened with respect to a lot of third-party witnesses who might have direct evidence of bad conduct and maybe even illegal conduct on the part of Matt Gaetz.
Pardon power. Now, the president has been on a pardon spree, and many think he's about to pardon Roger Stone, his longtime friend and one-time campaign advisor, who's being sentenced, I think, any minute now. They're in a break for crimes of obstructing justice, witness tampering, lying to Congress. Do you think Trump should pardon Roger Stone?
I do, and I think that it requires a review of the pardon power.
Come on.
Nick 'em, you lock 'em up, and you throw away the door.